Jeff Gordon's race-winning press conference started out with a good but also hilarious question.
We've always known that Kyle doesn't know a lot about cars.
Can't wait to see where this question is going. He obviously doesn't need to.
He doesn't need to. And it came out a lot in Indianapolis where he'd be asked questions and he'd have no idea what people were talking about. Well, today he says, I don't even know what we were doing on strategy. He said, I guess it's like looking at homework. I don't even have any idea what I'm looking at. And so how is it that a guy who knows so little about the car and has so little understanding of how it works is able to be so successful?
Because he drives the wheels off of it. I think if you're making lap time, making good decisions, he was really good through making up positions on the restarts when he needed to. When those other guys came into pit and he's out there on a little bit older tires, maintaining lap times the way he was. Those are just the things that great drivers do and do well, and he's one of the greats, right? Yeah, I think it's obviously extracting the most speed out of a car. That you don't have to know anything about a car to extract speed out of it. I think where it comes down to where he probably is a little too humble in some of the things he says is that he's a key element of what the car is doing, to be able to give that communication information back to Cliff and the team to get more out of it. There's a lot of data, these days that they can go off of, but still, if the car's loose or tight or whatever the balance is, he's got to give him that feedback in the race, and he gives great feedback. But I think, mostly it's when Cliff says, hey, we got to make up some spots here, or, hey, we need to run this kind of a pace. He's able to do those things. So I guess he just does the things he needs to do right. You don't have to worry about the others.
Can he change his own oil, do you think?
I just don't know why he'd want to, but...
We're going to come back up here to Jeff, and then I know we have a question in the back, too.
Jeff, all the stuff that was surrounding Larson this week, obviously he said, he wasn't too stressed about it. He said he was less stressed than people probably thought he was. But some drivers would probably get pretty bent out of shape that they'd be in limbo about waivers and stuff like that and let it maybe derail them. Is it any surprise how he handled this entire, process and is able to just bounce back and just win right away?
Yeah, I would say, he's very calm and cool through a lot of things, maybe even too much sometimes, right? But it is just sort of his personality and his upbringing and the way that he handles things, and that really works well for you when you've had a bad weekend or something that hasn't gone well. It works against you when you want to savor the victory and enjoy it, because you're able to move past things, fairly quickly. So good and bad, but I definitely saw a little bit more in him than maybe he's letting on to of some of the concerns when Monday came around. I kept telling him not to worry, but I was worried too. So.
We have a question in the middle back, and then we'll go to Bob, and then we'll come up front.
Jonathan Howard with On3 Sports, Jeff. Given how chaotic that first part of the race was, watching that last stage unfold that way, were you nervous that, somebody was going to slide out on the track and rack him up again for a restart, or did it kind of feel like things were playing out and he was going to be able to do, at least attempt what he needed to do today to win?
Yeah, you're always worried about that when you're playing out a strategy and things have to go your way. You're concerned about that. At the beginning of the race, right, it was pretty crazy being on the radio listening to the crew chiefs and, who they kind of converse with on the radio about strategy. And, at first it's like, oh, these cautions are good. We'll stay out and get our track position. And then it was like, oh, now we're going to a place where this is going to get a little bit, difficult because now others have come in. So you knew there was going to be a lot of sort of flip-flopping on strategy, but you just weren't sure how it was going to play out. And so I thought they were in, all of our cars really were in a pretty good position. But when they came in, not the very last time, but the time before that, I got concerned because I saw where there was only like a 12 to 15 lap gap between fuel and tires. And even though, if it went green, that could play out well. But if it didn't, that gap just gets narrower and narrower where the advantage is not there, and it even got to a place at one point where, like the 48 you saw, they came in as soon as they knew they could make it to the end and just said, hey, let's just get fuel, as soon as we can, and no tires. And had the 5 and the 9 done that strategy, they wouldn't have gotten, the win or the position that the 9 got. So, I tell you what, these races are never easy to win on the racetrack, as you're navigating the track and the competitors. But boy, on the pit box, listen to these guys and the stress that's going on of when you have a car you think is capable of winning, but not sure if you're making the right decisions. That's where the real stress is.
We're going to go in the far back to Bob, then we'll go up here to Kevin, and then Adam.
Bob Pockris, Fox Sports. I know we talked a lot about Larson, but how was the team and the organization as a whole over the last 8 days before finding out about the waiver? And then was there a sense of relief afterward? Like, would you have expected a different approach or a different maybe mindset from the group if the decision had gone the other way?
I didn't see it affecting the majority of the team. I think it was on the minds of Cliff and Kyle and Rick and Jeff Andrews and myself and Chad and at that level, maybe on the PR media side of things. But as far as how that trickled down the team, I didn't see where they were really unwavered by it. I mean, they seem to, that's a funny word for it. But no, they seem to be business as usual and prepping for the next race, the next 2 races, the way that they normally do. So, I think the best medicine in any of those situations is getting back to the racetrack. And so especially when they got here and, home track for Kyle and I think a track that they enjoy racing at and a lot of the competitors do. So I think that put a lot of that to rest.
Hey, Jeff, Kevin Cole, Black to Sacramento. And it seemed like Kyle on the radio, they just kind of let him drive. But when it came down to turn 11 near the walls down here, it was barely 2 wides and very slow at points. But Kyle would get at least a second on the end down there every time. Is that something you guys talked about at all as an organization, or it just played out as it did?
Yeah, I think you extract the speed where the car gives you feedback, right? If you're able to get a little bit more out of the brake zones, you get a little more out of the brake zones. If this is one of those tracks where you have the low speed stuff and you have a setup that might be good for the low speed stuff, but how do you make the car good on the high speed as well? And so this has always been a compromise type of racetrack as a driver and as a team setting the car up. I mean, I was mainly focused there at the end on the 19 car because even though Kyle got by him, after he got by him, the 19 held with him a lot more than I thought with the tire differential. So, I thought that the 19 was good enough coming down the hill in the high-speed stuff that he might be able to get back to his bumper. But Kyle, I thought, was just really good at the areas where his car was launching off the corners and into 11. He was making time up there, so was able to build a little bit of a gap.
We're going to go in the back right to Adam.
Adam Carabine, RacingRefresh.com. A lot was made coming into this weekend about the repave and how tire degradation was not going to be as big of a factor. It looks like Kyle Larson ended up winning because he had fresher tires. Is that something like... Is that a strategy call that's made on the fly? And maybe you could just speak to maybe one of the strengths of the 5 team is their strategy calls.
I think everybody had a lot of concerns going into the race because we saw that there was some blistering from just a lot of heat being built up with the extra, with the faster lap times and the new pavement and what Goodyear has to do to a tire to be more durable. So I think that they saw some heat that caused a little bit of blistering coming into the race. But the tires held up really, really well today. So maybe it's just rubber being laid down from having all the cars on the track at one time. Maybe the pace was just a little bit different. But I think we knew that if the tires didn't have these blisters that the pace would hold on pretty good, and so it did. So it really just turned into a track position race. You know, it was all the cars are running such close in pace and in speed that if you could get off strategy, then you might have either a fuel or a tire advantage, and that's the way it worked out.
It sure did work out for Kyle Larson, a win in wine country at Sonoma Raceway, his home track.
I know you have to trust them strategy-wise, but you came out 22nd, so I'm sure you're like, oh, great, now I got to, like, it's going to be hard to get through here.
Yeah.
I mean, what was your mentality at that point, you know, knowing that you have so far to go?
Yeah, you know, they have a way better understanding of strategy than I do. So yeah, when I guess we flipped the second stage, and then yeah, I was like, man, we're gonna be like 22nd here. There wasn't as many people that had pitted as I thought might. So like, gosh, I just don't know if I'm gonna have time to, you know, the distance that I'm gonna have to the leaders. I just wouldn't know if I would ever have time to get there. And then, yeah, I'm just out there clicking laps away. I felt like those guys pitted really early into that run. And so then I ran out in the lead, it felt like, for a long time. And then, you know, I wasn't sure if people were on, like, a 3-stop strategy. So, like, when I made my final pit stop and came out behind the guys that had pitted, it seemed like a lot earlier than me. I was like, okay, I mean, it's going to be pretty easy. I beat Ross. You know, I didn't let him pass me. Like, all these people are probably going to have to pit off in front of me again. And then I was asking, like, hey, am I racing these guys or what? And they're like, yeah, you're racing all of them. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm still like 10th. So I just I knew I was going to be faster for, you know, 8-10 laps, but I just didn't know, like, once the tires came up to temp, if, you know, they would equal out at some point, because there were still 20-something laps left. So, you know, it did. It definitely got closer to equaling out, but I still just had enough, you know, once I got to third and slowly was gaining on them and timed it out, you know, right to when Martin, you know, got racing with him, that I was kind of right there to capitalize.
I'm going to go 2 here in the front and the left and the right, and then we'll go back to Adam and Cameron.
Right behind you.
Hey, Kyle, Keenan O'Doherty, Press Democrat. Congratulations. Second time you've won here, kind of like a home track for you, Northern California native. Does it feel better the second time? I know you've only had a couple minutes to really digest it, but does it feel any different than the first time? Feel a little bit better?
No, I mean, it feels similar, I guess. I remember it being kind of a fairly similar, you know, final stage, the way that played out. You know, I remember that year we didn't flip the stages, so we, you know, won both stages and then had to restart, like 20-something, and, yeah, just drove our way to the lead there. And there was other cautions and stuff, but we had a great car again that day. It was the other layout, so we had to use the carousel and stuff. But, yeah, it just feels good to get a win in the Cup Series, but, you know, with it being at home, you know, feels even more special, you know. So, yeah, get to see friends and all that, you know, this week. And really, I think all of us just enjoy coming out here because it's beautiful and, you know, it's kind of a vacation. So it's always a cherry on top when you can finish the weekend off with a win.
All right, Kyle, Kevin Koblak to Sacramento. Hey, you had a great race going down to the turns in 11 down there. It seemed like you were catching them guys at least a second every time trying to catch that pack. And then when you got to Kyle Busch, was there any concern there at all when you were trying to pass him?
Yeah, I mean, I had like thoughts of, well, I guess we'll see where we stand with each other as I was getting closer to him. But, you know, he always races with a lot of respect. So I was very, you know, I was surprised. You know, he kind of just let me go and, you know, didn't get raced with me. But he's very respectful out there, and he's very smart about the way he manages his races. You know, I think probably going through his mind is like, you know, I'm obviously on fresher tires. If I race him for, you know, a lap, I piss my tire. This is, you know, me thinking what he's thinking. Like, he's probably thinking, you know, I pissed my tires off for a lap, and then now was it really worth it, you know, racing him? So, yeah, he let me go as soon as I got to him, and, you know, it sounded like he got spun on the last lap, which is unfortunate. But, yeah, was very thankful for that because, you know, I just didn't need to waste any time, and he allowed me to just get by and not really slow down. So I was very happy and thankful for that.
We're going to go to Adam, and then Cameron, and then Jenna.
Adam Carabine, RacingRefresh.com. From an enjoyment standpoint for you in a race like this, do you prefer something like this where you kind of have to pass your way up to the front and win, or would you prefer something where you start on the pole and stay there the entire race?
I just prefer winning. So however you have to do that, whatever. But, I like being on offense, and our strategy was very offense-driven today. So, that made it fun, because you were the one passing people rather than just trying to fight and hold off and, push your brake zones so you can just hold people off and all that. So I felt like being on offense, I was just able to make less mistakes throughout the day. And, I think people recognized that we were on offense too, so they didn't really race me too hard. My car was just really good in the brake zones because I was on fresher tires. So, yeah, that part of it's fun. But, when you can win, no matter how you win, it's pretty fun.
Go to Cameron, Jenna, and Bob.
Cameron Richardson, NASCAR.com. Kyle, what about your racecraft just helps you get through the field better than some of the guys that were on the same strategy as you? Because if you look at the results, guys who were on the same strategy, like Blaney, Reddick, Bowman, Suarez, they weren't really able to make their way through the field. Just, what separates your race car from theirs? Like, why was it easier for you than them?
Well, ultimately we weren't. I think we didn't end up being on the exact same strategies. And we were to a point, and then, at least judging off of Ross, who in my mind, I was racing for the win at the time, or at least, the first person. We both kind of got through traffic really well. And then it finally got to where it was thinned out, and people started ducking off the pit. And then I lost him in my mirror, so I'm like, okay, he pitted. So I didn't know how the strategy was going to work out. So I think they just made a hiccup on strategy. I think Ross did, and it sounded like, talking to Cliff, Reddick's team pitted and maybe did fuel only. So, I think Chase and myself, I'm guessing we're the only two that really were on the winning strategy. And, it just allowed us to be on offense there, that last, second half of the final stage. So, yeah, we weren't really on the same strategy as everybody else. At least at one point we were, and then they got off of it.
Go ahead, Jenna.
Jenna Fryer, AP. Kyle, you said how you had 2 days off this week, the first 2 days off in forever. Back-to-back NASCAR weeks. You're kind of getting back into the rhythm of what your life really is like, and now a win. Are you feeling like you're back in your norm, or do you have like 87,000 sprint car races?
I'm racing on Tuesday, so that is norm.
No, but do you feel like you're getting back into a much more normal Kyle Larson pace?
Yeah, I guess so. But my life stays so hectic that I never really felt like I got off of a normal week for myself. Indy was actually not normal because it was more relaxing than anything. You're just sitting there and you're at the same location every day. People thought that I'm flying back and forth to Charlotte and like wearing myself out, but it was like I got more sleep there than I would at home. So no, but I guess if anything, it gets a little bit more hectic now that I'm just NASCAR racing and just sprint car racing. So I'll do more back and forth throughout the weeks and all that. But that does feel normal for me. So yeah, it was really, really nice for me to get to come here this week and get to just do nothing for one day and then just go be a normal, tourist on Thursday. It was just a very relaxing week. And a lot of the drivers, I think, kind of do that. We all stay at the Carneros Inn there and, after qualifying, like right after qualifying, we all hurried back to the hotel and, I thought I was fast, but Bubba and Ryan, Blaney, they were all already in the hot tub by the time, I got there. So, Denny, was up there. So it's, no, I didn't. I soaked up the last little bit of sun, but no, it's just, we all, I think, just enjoy coming out here and decompressing a little bit.
Where do you race Tuesday?
Eagle, Nebraska. It's like 55,000 win.
Go in the back to Bob, and then up front to Steven, and then Jonathan.
Bob Hawkers, Fox Sports. you gained a lot of points on Denny today since he engine blew, put more distance between you and Truex, and a little bit over Elliott for the regular season championship. Just what could you have thought that after skipping Charlotte that you would be back in this position atop the standings, both regular season and having the most playoff points?
Maybe not so quickly, but yeah, I mean, for sure, I thought we would still have a great shot to win the regular season title, which there's still a lot of racing left to be had. I could easily have a couple DNFs here coming up, but no, I knew after Charlotte and after seeing how the points shook out, I wasn't out of it. So yeah, their misfortune today really helps, but we still just have to stay executing and trying to get great stage points, get race wins, obviously, stage wins, all that. But yeah, just we've done a great job executing, so just got to keep that up.
Can I follow up on that?
Bob has a follow-up quickly.
Is it weird at all to go from start of week, you don't know if you're in the playoffs, to now being, kind of in position to
Are we still talking waivers?
A little bit, just because the dynamic seems interesting to me that you don't know if you're going to be in the playoffs to the point that
literally, my mind never wavered. It was always kind of focused on executing and winning the regular season points. Whether that be on the owner side or whatever. It didn't really. My mindset has not changed at all. So, just I race to win every single race. So, yeah, I haven't really thought any differently since missing Charlotte.
Go up front to Steven.
Steven Sump, frontrush.com. Kyle, with 8 cautions in the first half of the race, was it driving in the final stage? Was it kind of surprising that the entire thing went green at the end after how chaotic it was to start?
Yeah, a bit for sure. But it was more surprising to me that we were having so many cautions early. I was just like, what the heck? Like, I just wanted to race. We'd go like one lap and they're like, oh, there's a big wreck behind you. And I'm like, God, dang. It just gets annoying having to coast around and save fuel under cautions and clutch it and refire and all that. So I was just wanting to go racing. So, but then, then once the race was playing out and, I felt like we were in a good position for strategy, I'm like, praying there would be no cautions. So, it worked out. But, I'm sure all of us were getting a little bit annoyed and frustrated with all those cautions. And I just kind of had to remind myself, like, just stay focused, stay calm. Don't get over anxious on one of these restarts and give it away.
With the new surface, was there kind of like a sense of like, everyone was still trying to figure out what to do, and that's why it went clean to the end? And also, what did you think about driving on the surface as well?
Yeah, I as far as the cautions went, I'm not sure what was causing them. Haven't seen any replays yet, but so I don't know if the surface had anything to do with that as far as like being extra aggressive because there's more grip. And then, for me in the surface, I'm very bad at, wore out surfaces on road courses, so I was happy when I heard they were repaving Sonoma because I knew it would kind of lend itself to me, somebody who's not easy on tires. So, it did, and I think same thing like Watkins Glen. Once they repaved that place, I got much better. So, keep repaving road courses.
Going back to Jonathan, we have a question over on the left too.
Hey, Kyle. Jonathan Howard with On3.com. I know that you say you don't pay attention to strategy a whole lot, and you get in the car and drive it. But how nice is it to have, you're a driver that is that way. How nice is it to have Cliff Daniels on the box where you can trust what he's telling you to do, and when he tells you to do things, that it's the right thing for you to do.
Well, that's all you really can do when you're behind the wheel is just trust that they've got it figured out. And then, as long as you keep the car on the racetrack, don't get passed by people, usually whatever strategy I feel like you're on is going to typically work out okay. You may not win, but you're still going to finish good. So, I'm out there trying to figure it all out and whatnot. I had an idea of the strategy before the race started, and then we had those, whatever it was, 8 cautions, and then I'm like, okay, in my mind, I'm like, well, is this a one-stop race now, or is this two-stop, or what? And then are people still on three-stop? Because it was going to be between a two and a three-stop race. So then I'm out there making laps. I'm just trying to figure it out. And they spent about a lap on the radio explaining the situation to me, and it just it helped. I like to have like a picture of what's going on. What are people doing around me, and it helps. That helps me kind of execute my race.
Hi, Kyle. Bill Sessa from the Napa Valley Register. Your foundation has a fundraiser going on this weekend. First of all, do you have any update? And do you think winning today will draw more attention to it?
I just got out of the car like an hour ago, so I think visors are probably just coming off people's helmets. So I have no update for you. But no, I am either way. I'm happy to have support from the competitors, and hopefully we can raise a lot of money. And yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to own a race one visor from Kyle Larson? So hopefully it goes for a lot. Jenna, you should bid. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I've heard you make a lot of money, so big IndyCar girl. I'm glad to see you here. I know you like hearing that.
Any final questions for Kyle? A couple follows from the front.
And Kyle, this is also your 20th win since joining Hendrick at the start of 2021. 3.5 years, 20 wins, championship, points leader now. Just, I guess, what can you say just about how you, Cliff, and everyone on Hendrick have just really gone out and just, taken over a lot of the competition?
Yeah, it's just, that's a great milestone, to get 20 wins in really a short period of time is special to me. So, wish I could have been here a long time ago, but no, it's just a phenomenal organization. I mean, it's the best in the business, and the timing also couldn't be any better. I feel like I've gotten to Hendrick, when they're really at peak or back to what peak used to be. So, yeah, and then being with Cliff Daniels and the whole 5 team, they are also great at what they do. So, just a lucky person, and hopefully you'll get 20 more wins in a short amount of time.
All right, we have time for a couple more. We'll go to Jeff and then wrap up with Adam.
I noticed that Friday and Saturday, Knoxville's in action. Do you think you might do a double duty with Iowa being so close?
I'd like to, for sure. Friday is tight on schedule. I don't think we're done practicing at Iowa Speedway till like 5:30. So, yeah, I mean, I'm guessing hot laps are at 6:30, so tight window. But, yeah, so I plan on it. We'll see how Tuesday goes. I've tore up a lot of equipment so far, so if I continue that, maybe we won't have enough stuff left. But, yeah, that's my hope. I would love to get more laps there at Knoxville. I don't typically ever get to race there before the Nationals, and it would be good to get more laps there.
I'll wrap up with Adam.
Yeah, just to follow up about driving on the new surface. What was the physical toll like on you today? Some other drivers were mentioning it was pretty rough out there, just driving like qualifying laps basically the entire race.
I don't know. It didn't feel much different as far as physicality to me. Every road course you go is pretty physical. At the end I'm pushing and I'm getting, tight and tensed up. I noticed like my lower back, but that would be typical for Sonoma, I feel like, in the past. So, yeah, it didn't feel much different to me.
Due to so many cautions, this race came down to strategy, and Larson's crew chief Cliff Daniels executed to perfection.
For a while there, it kind of looked like Buescher not flipping the stages might actually work. I mean, we hadn't really seen an on-track pass all day for the lead, but you obviously were confident enough that it was going to still work. So how did you have that confidence?
I don't know that I was beyond confident that it was going to work. I just knew that when they had flipped what we were doing early in the race, it was going to put them in a position to have to pit early in the final fuel window. And from that point forward, no matter what, they're going to be on defense. So the only way to beat that is we had to figure out how to be on offense. And our bed was made when they had all pitted off behind us, all the cautions that we had in stage 1. We had to really commit to, at that point, we were a long car, so we just had to commit to the long side of things. to have the offensive tires for the end of the race, if that makes sense. If we would have pivoted and given up that second run when, I guess it would have been the beginning of stage 3 when they all, were early in the fuel window. If we would have pivoted and pitted early then, we would have come out right behind them on the same tires, just not going anywhere. So we had to go long.
Hey, Cliff. Hey, it seemed like the definitely all the cautions the whole race. It seemed like everybody was kind of thrown off on that end. But once Kyle got pitted and started coming down to chase everybody, it seemed like he really on turn 11 gained at least a second every time he went down there. Was that planned or anything, or that just let Kyle drive the car?
Yeah, like I just mentioned, we knew that the only way we're going to get back ahead of some of those guys that had kind of flipped the strategy on us is to have, fresher tires by some amount. It was hard to know the right number, 10 laps, 15 laps, 20 laps, whatever the right amount of, freshness on our tires as compared to them. But once they kind of cycled through that way and we had the clean track, the way the field had spread out by that point and we kind of cycled through, I knew that with, new tires and a lot of grip in them, Kyle was going to be really fast. I thought our car was, in the mix of a top 5 car. Didn't know that it was a winning car at the time, but luckily the disparity of the laps on tires is what helped us get up to them. Yeah.
Any additional questions for Cliff? We can go back to Jeff. And we'll go to Bob in the back after that.
When you don't really know, I mean, the way this race played out is very unpredictable because of the amount of cautions, especially in the next gen era of road courses. I mean, this amount of cautions is like unheard of.
Yeah, it's unprecedented, really.
Yeah, so like, are you going into it saying, all right, if there's not very many cautions, we do this. If there's one in the, I mean, to have 8 in the first 2 stages, is there any contingency for that? Are you deciding that on the fly and seeing how it changes?
Really good question, and part of the reason that I like that you're asking that is because it was so unexpected for us. None of our conversations hinged on how many cautions were we going to get. It was all, with a repave, do you get tire blisters? Do your tires go 15 laps? Do they go 30 laps? And the unknowns were more on the tire side of things, and knowing how to strategize around that, 2-stop or 3-stop really for the whole day. Do you short both stages and, pin on the fuel number in stage 3, or do you try to hit the true fuel numbers to 2-stop the whole race? With tires being the factor of uncertainty, we never thought that cautions, even a yellow here or there at a next-gen road course race, okay, but not so many cautions. So that was actually fun because it changed everything everybody had in their mindset for how to understand pace, fall off, all those things, that it just changed the factors that you had to solve for. And people could do things differently. We were completely off script with the way that we called the race, but that was fun.
Go to Bob.
Bob Hockris, Fox Sports. Did you consider the strategy that some others were on? And if so, do you like the idea of Kyle more on the attack versus fuel mileage?
Both. Honestly, both. We considered when those guys were pitting, whether it was leading up to stage 1, during stage 1, right after stage 1, at the start of stage 2, of course we had considered pitting that whole time, but you're still looking at your green flag laps run to yellow flag laps run ratio. We just didn't have that many laps on our tires, and every time you would take off, you still had really good pace. And so at that point, you were pushing your fuel windows far enough so that under green in stage 3, you weren't going to have to take 2 cans of fuel, which we still didn't have to do. So we knew we could have the advantage of a faster stop time running deeper into stage 3 and having fresher tires, to your point about giving Kyle fresher tires. It was going to put us more in an offensive situation than a defensive situation. At the time, you didn't quite know who was going to pit when and how all that would play out, but obviously once we kind of made our bed, you really had to stay down that path. If we would have come off of that path, we would have sacrificed any offensive advantage that we would have had later in the race, if that makes sense.
Going to go over here to the right to Adam.
Adam Carabine, RacingRefresh.com. In practice, you did have an extended practice just to get a better sense of the repave. It didn't seem like many teams went longer than 15 laps on a set of tires. Were you concerned just keeping them out there longer on a set of tires? We did see some blistering and stuff like that. Were we concerned that that was going to be an issue?
Yeah, of course. And a couple points that I'll touch on there. I think part of the reason that people didn't go as long as you would have expected in practice is because we just don't get that many opportunities with a full open practice to change springs and geometry and other things. So you take this opportunity to go learn. So a lot of us had planned changes that were outside of our weekly impound style changes. So, back to your question, without cars running that many laps in practice because we were all kind of in R&D mode, to a point, you just didn't see the number of laps on tires to know, is blistering a thing, is wear a thing. You just didn't quite have the data to go off of to understand that. So that's where, back to one of Jeff's questions earlier, we all had the question mark going into the race, more on the side of tire life, tire blisters, some of the repave factors, not necessarily the caution flag factor, that ultimately we saw today.
Go to Jonathan and wrap up with Cliff.
Jonathan on 3.com, right here, Cliff. It seems that neither you or Kyle get too high during races and stuff. Like nice, calm, collected. Does it feel like you two mesh well that way, where you kind of keep each other calm, or is it just the nature of both of you?
I think we've had enough seat time together to know that, as long as we can stay together, stay connected to overcome whatever may or may not be going our way, that we can typically fight through to have a good result, have a solid finish. And, there was some intensity and some concerns just with the way the strategy played out today, and rightfully so from him, trying to understand what was going around him, who was ahead of him on what tires, who was behind him on what tires. So trying to paint that picture for him, just so that he knew, the objectives that he still had ahead of him. That's kind of what I was focused on doing. Once we understood the way we thought the strategy was going to play out, and ultimately did. So, I think our reps of doing that together, and certainly there's been times that we've failed to accomplish our mission together, and I think you learn, the healthy things that you need to learn from both sides of the coin, from, the wins and from when it doesn't go your way.
For the Kenny Wallace YouTube channel, I'm Charlie Marlow.